Good morning. It is Tuesday, the 2nd of November. Our top story. The Queen has urged world leaders to rise above politics and create a safer, stabler future for the planet.
She was speaking ahead of the second day of climate talks in Glasgow. In a video message, she said the time for words has now moved to the time for action. Well, Nina will be reflecting on that and everything else for us this morning. She's in Glasgow. Morning, Nina.
Yeah, good morning. It's a misty day starting up here in Glasgow. And you're right, that speech from the Queen, it was unusually emotional. She talked about her great pride in her family and she talked about her deep fears for the future of the planet. And that emotion was really the tone of the day here in Glasgow yesterday. The Secretary-General of the UN said that we are digging our own graves by using fossil fuel. And President Joe Biden said none of us will escape if we fail to seize the moment. But actually watching yesterday, perhaps the most emotive speeches came from people who stood up there and who are living with their homes affected by climate change. We'll hear from them in a moment. And today it is expected, though, that the first major deal will be signed on deforestation to protect and even restore forests. Yesterday, Greta Thunberg led a chant saying no more blah, blah, blah. So how much are politicians' words here translating into action? Victoria Gill reports.
On the first day of this crucial climate conference, world leaders, royalty and activists took to the stage to set the tone for the days of negotiation that are ahead.
You all have the power here today to be better, to remember that in your meeting rooms and drafting documents are more than just black and white objects. To remember that in your words, you wield the weapons that can save us or sell us out.
The ceremony and speeches were rounded off with a reception hosted by Boris Johnson, attended by the Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall and the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
It gives me great pleasure, therefore, to introduce Her Majesty, the Queen.
The Queen, absent on the advice of her doctors, sent a recorded message, a reminder that what's achieved here will decide the planet that we leave for future generations.
It is the hope of many that the legacy of this summit, written in history books yet to be printed, will describe you as the leaders who did not pass up the opportunity, and that you answered the call of those future generations. That you left this conference as a community of nations with a determination, a desire, and a plan to address the impact of climate change, and to recognize that the time for words has now moved to the time for action.
There are some early signs of hope on some major sources of greenhouse gas emissions. Today, leaders representing more than 85% of the world's forests will commit to halting deforestation and reversing it by 2030.
This is a hugely ambitious pledge from world leaders because of the sheer scale of it. We have destroyed over 50% of land-based ecosystems, and this announcement is not just about protecting forests to keep them standing, it's actually about starting to restore and put so much of our wild landscapes back.
Some experts remain pessimistic, though. A survey of climate scientists suggests many are not confident that global emissions can be cut quickly enough to avoid a climate catastrophe.
His Excellency, Mr. Narendra Damodar Das Modi, Prime Minister of India.
And while India, the world's third largest emitter, used the first day of the conference to announce its own net zero target date of 2070, that could be too late to avoid the worst consequences of climate change. In the gulf between words and action, the global temperature continues to rise. And with 200 countries now at the table, there's a lot more talking to do. Victoria Gill, BBC News in Glasgow.
Well, Adam Fleming, our chief political correspondent, is with us throughout the morning and was watching events yesterday. Adam, that was an unusual tone from the Queen, wasn't it? What sort of impact do you think that will have?
Hi Nina, I think it will have had quite a big impact on those world leaders in that room last night where they were having a drinks reception after a day of speeches here in the convention venue. And do you remember when it was announced last week that the Queen wasn't going to be able to make it in person, and some people speculated that that would be a negative thing. I think maybe the fact that she was on video meant that it was a little bit more intense than if she was doing a speech at the podium. And what made it even more intense was that she talked about her own family, not only her children and grandchildren, but I think for one of the first times since he died, she talked about her late husband.
This is a duty I'm especially happy to discharge, as the impact of the environment on human progress was a subject close to the heart of my dear late husband, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. It is a source of great pride to me that the leading role my husband played in encouraging people to protect our fragile planet lives on through the work of our eldest son, Charles, and his eldest son, William. I could not be more proud of them.
And then she talked about the fact that over her more than 70 years on the throne, she'd met all the great statesmen and she'd seen what made a good leader, which, as guilt trips go, is a pretty classy one. And I'm sure those words will be ringing in leaders' ears when they have their second day of speeches today. And in terms of the action here at COP, the big announcement we're expecting is on forests. A large group of countries are going to come together and say that they will stop deforestation and then reverse it by planting more trees by 2030. And that'll be backed up by about £15 billion of investment coming from both governments and companies and philanthropists as well. Now, as with a lot of the things at COP, the headline sounds really good. There's still quite a few unanswered questions. Progress will have to be monitored quite carefully. And a lot of people will say this was actually a pledge that was first introduced in 2014, but will actually not happen until 16 years later. And I'm sure some communities, some scientists will say, isn't that a little bit too late?
Yeah, the devil, as ever, in the detail. Thank you, Adam Fleming. And important to say that although this goes on for a fortnight or so, after today and tomorrow, the world leaders begin heading home, and then it's up to their negotiators to take over to come up with whatever follows. In the next half hour, we'll be speaking with Christiana Figueres. Now, she's the former UN chief lead on climate change. She was part of the team that managed to secure that deal in Paris. That was really solid. It was really tangible. It's led us to where we are now. But she's been very critical of the British government as host nation, saying they're not necessarily leading from the front. We'll hear what she has to say in about 20 minutes' time.
Nina, thank you very much for that. We'll be back in Glasgow with you shortly.
Now, France has postponed a threat to block UK boats from landing at its ports in a row over post-Brexit fishing rights.
President Emmanuel Macron says the sanctions are being delayed, so negotiations to resolve the disagreement can then continue.
Let's speak now to our correspondent Jessica Parker. She's at the port of Boulogne-sur-Mer. Jessica, a slight pause in the arguments, but no sign of a compromise just yet.
No, you're right. So last night, as you say, the French President Emmanuel Macron said that while talks were ongoing, the French wouldn't impose cross-channel sanctions as they had threatened to do. There was a deadline of midnight last night. So talks look set to continue. But as you suggest, we haven't had any indication of a major breakthrough here. What is this row about? Well, people may remember, it is that in places like this, there is a feeling that French fishing boats are not being granted the licences they need, they deserve, that they should be entitled to under the post-Brexit trading arrangements. The UK has said it's being fair, it is looking at what is outlined in that trade agreement and has granted the licences that it should. But there's been ongoing boat-by-boat analyses going on to try and see if the evidence can be found to see if more boats can be granted licences to fish in the waters off the Channel Islands and the United Kingdom. So those talks will continue. And interestingly, Lord Frost, the Brexit minister, is going to head to Paris on Thursday. So I think that's basically our new deadline to look forward to now, where he will meet France's Europe Minister Clément Beaune, both men known for a fairly robust diplomatic style. So it'll be interesting to see what emerges from those talks. But it is feeling a bit familiar, lots of noise, lots of talk, a deadline missed. It feels like Brexit is happening all over again.
Jess, thanks very much indeed.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.